Story 1 by a window that never closed. I used to spend summers at my uncle's lake house in Maine. It was an old wooden cabin sitting right on the waterline, the small dock that stretched into the foggy lake. The first night I stayed there alone, I noticed something odd. One of the upstairs bedroom windows was open. I tried closing it, but no matter how hard I pulled, the frame wouldn't lock. The glass rattled against the wind, creaking in the quiet night. I gave up, telling myself I'd fix it in the morning. But as I lay in bed, I could swear I heard footsteps outside on the deck, crunching against the old boards. When I looked out the window, the moon lit up the dock, but it was empty. The water barely moved, yet I couldn't shake the sound of those slow, deliberate steps circling the house. I used to spend summers at my uncle's lake house in Maine. It was a small, weathered cabin that sat right on the edge of the water. The wooden siding was faded gray, and the boards on the dock groaned whenever you stepped on them. The air smelled like pine and wet earth, and when the wind blew off the lake, carried a kind of cold that slipped into your bones. My uncle always warned me about the creaks and groans of the place, saying it was just the house settling, but sometimes those sounds didn't feel natural. The first night I stayed there alone, I noticed something off. One of the upstairs bedroom windows was cracked open. It looked ordinary at first, but when I tried to shut it, I realized the latch was broken. I pulled hard, but the frame wouldn't lock. The glass shuddered against the night air, rattling softly with every gust of wind. I told myself I'd fix it in the morning, but in the back of my mind, I wondered why my uncle hadn't mentioned it before. That night, I lay in bed listening to the water lap against the dock. Silence of the forest pressed against the walls of the cabin. Then I heard it. Slow footsteps, heavy, deliberate, dead, pressed into the boards outside, moving along the deck. The sound wasn't random, like an animal. It was steady, human. I froze in bed, staring at the ceiling, every muscle in my body tense. Was someone out there? Was it just my imagination playing tricks on me? I finally forced myself to get up and look through the cracked window. The moonlight reflected across the still water. The dock stretched out into the fog, empty and silent. Nothing moved but the footsteps. They had been so clear, too real to ignore. My heart thudded in my chest as I scanned the tree line. Everything was still, too still. I told myself it was just wood shifting, maybe the dock settling. I tried to believe that, but my stomach told me otherwise. I crawled back into bed, pulling the blanket up to my chest, straining my ears for any sound. Minutes felt like hours. Then it came again. Slow steps, circling the cabin. What kind of person would be out here in the middle of nowhere at that time of night? I tried not to breathe too loudly, afraid whoever it was might hear me. The sound paused right outside my wall. I swear I could feel the weight of whoever was out there pressing against the boards. Then the footsteps continued, fading toward the dock again. I didn't dare look this time. I lay there with my eyes closed, every muscle locked in place, waiting for morning. When the sun came up, the house felt different, warmer, safer. I convinced myself I had dreamed it all. But when I went downstairs, something caught my eye. The window on the far side of the cabin was open, wider than it had been the night before. Had I left it that way? Or had someone opened it while I slept? I closed it quickly, trying to calm my nerves. I told myself it didn't matter. Maybe the wind had pushed it open. Still, I couldn't shake the unease that clung to me like a shadow. All day, I tried to keep busy, wandering the woods, skipping stones in the lake. But in the back of my mind, I dreaded nightfall. That evening, I double-checked every lock, every door, wedged a chair beneath the handle of the front door, just in case. The window upstairs still rattled, refusing to lock, but I pushed it shut as tightly as I could. By the time I climbed into bed, I felt a little better, till I heard the sound again. Slow, deliberate footsteps, crunching against the wood. This time, they didn't fade. They stopped right beneath the broken window. I couldn't see anything, but I felt it. The presence of someone standing directly below me, staring up. I stayed frozen, gripping the blanket. The silence was unbearable. Then, faintly, I heard breathing. Deep, slow breaths, as if someone was trying to control their own fear or their excitement. Was I the one being watched? Was I the one trapped in someone else's game? The breathing stopped. The footsteps retreated. The night stretched on. Somehow, I drifted off to sleep, though my body stayed tense the entire time. When morning finally came, I bolted out of bed to check the dock. There were no footprints. No signs anyone had been there, but I knew what I'd heard. I called my uncle that afternoon, telling him about the noises, the broken window, and the strange feeling I couldn't shake. He was silent for a long time before saying, "That's why I don't use that room." "What do you mean?" I asked. He sighed. "That window's been like that for years. And every time someone tries to fix it, it's the same thing happens. Footsteps, breathing, like something is waiting to come in." I thought he was joking, trying to scare me, but he wasn't. His voice was low, steady, serious. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep in the upstairs room. I dragged a blanket downstairs and tried to sleep on the couch. But even from there, I heard it. The faint rattle of the upstairs window. The slow creak of footsteps moving across the deck. Was it outside, or was it already inside the house? I didn't check. Couldn't. I just lay there in the darkness, counting every breath until daylight finally broke through the trees. I left the lake house the next morning, abandoning the weekend early. I told my uncle I'd never stay there again. He didn't argue. "Okay." But even now, years later, I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and swear I hear it again. The sound of footsteps circling my house. Slow, patient, waiting for me to look out the window. What would I see if I did? The second night was worse. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of dripping water. Thinking I left a faucet on, I checked the bathroom dry, and I noticed the sound was coming from the open window. When I peeked out, the dock was darker than usual, almost swallowed by fog, and that's when I saw it. It's a pale, wet face staring up at me from the ground beneath the window. Not standing, not moving, it's crouched low, eyes wide open. I froze, gripping the window frame. My heart pounded so loud I was sure it could hear me. The face never blinked. After what felt like forever, I backed away and locked myself in the hallway. When I returned with a flashlight, it was gone. The second night in the lake house was worse than the first. I had barely managed to fall asleep when a sound pulled me out of a shallow dream. At first, it was faint, just a slow, steady drip, like water landing in a basin. My eyes shot open. The house was silent, except for that noise. A drop, then another, then another. It echoed faintly in the stillness of the wooden cabin. I sat up, trying to place the source. My first thought was the bathroom, maybe a leaky faucet. I dragged myself out of bed and checked, flicking on the dim yellow light. The sink was dry. The tub was bone dry. Not a single drop of water anywhere. My pulse quickened as the dripping sound continued, louder now, as if mocking me from somewhere else in the house. If it wasn't the bathroom, then where was it coming from? I turned off the light and stood in the dark hallway, listening. The sound was rhythmic, unnatural in the silence of the night. I followed it back to my bedroom, each step slower than the last. When I stepped inside, the cold air hit me harder than before. That's when I realized the sound was coming from the open window. The broken frame rattled slightly in the night breeze. The dripping was clearer now, sharp against the wood. My stomach sank as I stepped closer. The moonlight outside was dim, blocked by a fog that clung thick over the lake. The dock was barely visible, its outline swallowed by shadows. What could possibly be dripping from the window at this hour? I leaned closer, my hand gripping the sill. The damp air carried a sour, earthy smell. My breath fogged against the glass, and that's when I froze. Just below me, at the base of the cabin wall, something was crouched in the dark. A pale shape hunched unnaturally close to the wood. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but then I saw it clearly. A face. A pale, wet face, staring up at me. Its skin glistened as though soaked in water. Dark strands of hair clung to its forehead. The eyes were wide open, unblinking, locked on me with a lifeless stare. Was I really seeing this, or had I finally lost my mind? I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My throat locked up, dry as sandpaper. The figure didn't move, didn't blink. It just crouched there, head tilted back at an unnatural angle, its hollow eyes locked on mine. A droplet slid off its chin, landing against the wood beneath with a sharp plop. I stumbled back, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. My vision tunneled, but I couldn't look away for long. I forced myself forward again, peeking once more through the cracked window. The face hadn't moved. It was still there, still staring, still dripping. The fog seemed to thicken around it, wrapping the dock in a suffocating blanket of gray. Why was it crouching there? Why didn't it move? The longer I stared, the colder the air grew around me. My breath felt shallow, and every hair on my arms stood up. The face didn't belong. Its features were too sharp, too pale, like a drowned body dragged up from the depths of the lake. My stomach turned as the thought hit me. Had it crawled out of the water? I backed away from the window, bumping into the edge of the bed. The wooden frame groaned beneath my weight. The sound felt deafening in the silence. When I looked again, the face was still there, motionless, but the eyes, they looked wider now, or maybe closer. I couldn't be sure. Had it moved while I blinked? I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand, hands trembling as I clicked it on. The beam cut through the fog like a blade, shaking as I tried to aim it out the window. For one split second, the light illuminated the ground beneath me. Empty. Nothing there. No pale face, no crouched figure. Just wet earth. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or more terrified. I leaned out further, scanning the dock, the tree line, the edges of the water, all empty. The fog moved in slow curls, swallowing anything more than a few feet away. I turned the flashlight off, heart still racing, telling myself I had imagined it all. But deep down, I knew what I had seen. That face was real. I locked the window shut as tight as it would go, even though the latch was broken. I dragged the dresser across the floor, shoving it up against the frame. The cane shook the whole time, and my breath wouldn't steady. But even as I sat back down on the bed, the sound returned. Drip, drip, only now. It wasn't outside the window anymore. It was inside the room. I called my uncle the next morning, telling him about the figure. He went quiet, then said, "That's why I never used the upstairs room. That window's been broken for years. Something always comes through it." I asked what he meant, but he just said, "Don't sleep in there again." That night, I heard the footsteps return. Slower, closer. This time, I didn't look. But the rattling of that window echoed through the whole house, shaking against the frame. Clank, something was trying to get inside. Next morning, I called my uncle. My voice was shaky as I explained what I had seen outside the window. I told him about the pale face, about how it had crouched there, dripping, motionless, about how it had stared directly at me in the dark. For a long time, he didn't respond. Silence stretched uncomfortably, his breathing faint on the line. Then he finally spoke, his tone low and steady. "That's why I never used that upstairs room," he said. My stomach dropped instantly. His words felt heavy, too casual to be a joke. "That window's been broken for years," he continued, "and something always comes through it." Was he serious, or was this some cruel attempt to scare me? I asked him what he meant, pressing for an explanation, but he didn't give me one. He just repeated himself, "Don't sleep in there again." The way he said it chilled me. Not like advice, not like a suggestion, but like a warning. Like he knew something was coming, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The rest of the day, I couldn't get his words out of my head. I tried distracting myself by going outside, walking along the dock, even skipping stones across the still water. But every time I looked back at the cabin, my eyes drifted to that window. The broken frame, the cracked glass, the shadowed emptiness behind it. What had he seen in that room before me? By the time night came, I had convinced myself I was overreacting. My uncle was just old. Maybe he liked to tell stories. Maybe the stress of being alone was getting to me. I told myself all of that as I checked the locks again. The front door, the back door, every window I could reach. Everything except the upstairs window. That one still rattled in the frame. The latch, useless, no matter how hard I tried. When I finally lay down in the living room instead of the bedroom, I felt a little safer. I pulled a blanket over myself on the couch. The quiet was thick, broken only by the occasional creak of the house settling. I stared at the ceiling, trying to slow my breathing. But just when my body started to relax, I heard it. The footsteps. They came slower this time, heavier, as if whoever it was taking their time. Step by step, I could hear the weight pressing into the boards outside. The sound carried through the silence of the night, closer with every second. Were they circling again, or were they heading straight for the window? I sat up, clutching the blanket against my chest, listening hard. The footsteps paused, directly outside the wall of the upstairs bedroom. My skin crawled as I pictured that pale face again, those lifeless eyes staring up. My chest tightened. The footsteps started again, not toward the dock this time, not around the house, but toward the side wall where the broken window waited. The rattling began almost immediately. The sound of glass shaking violently in the frame. The wood groaning under pressure. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't weather. Something was forcing it, trying to push it open. What kind of thing forces its way in through a second-story window? I stayed frozen, staring at the ceiling, every muscle locked. The rattling continued, louder now. It shook through the whole house, echoing down the walls. Dust fell from the ceiling above me. I pressed my hand against my mouth, terrified it would hear me breathing. The sound grew frantic, desperate, like it was fighting against the barrier that kept it outside. I wanted to run. I wanted to get out of the house entirely, but my legs refused to move. It was like my body understood something my brain didn't. If I ran, if I moved, whatever was at that window would notice. And if it noticed, maybe it wouldn't stop at the window. So how long would it keep trying before it found another way inside? I don't know how long it lasted. It felt like hours, though it could have been minutes. The rattling finally stopped. The silence that followed was worse, heavier, as if the air itself was holding its breath. I listened desperately for footsteps, for anything that would tell me it had left. But there was nothing, not a sound. Just silence, thick enough to make my ears ring. I lay there on the couch, eyes wide open, waiting for the sunrise. My body never relaxed. My heartbeat never slowed. And every so often, I thought I heard the faintest creak of a floorboard upstairs. Just one, then nothing, then another. Was it inside, or was it waiting by the window still? When morning finally came, I didn't go upstairs. I didn't even glance at that window. Okay? Packed my things, shoved them in the car, and locked the cabin door behind me. I told myself I'd never stay there again. That the lake house wasn't worth it. That whatever was in that upstairs room could keep it. But the truth is, I don't think it stayed behind. Sometimes, in the middle of the night at home, I hear it again. It's that faint rattle, that broken glass shake. It's like a window being forced against its frame. It always comes from the upstairs of my house. And the worst part is, none of my windows are broken. Story 2 boat that shouldn't have been there 2 years ago. My friends and I rented a lake house for a weekend getaway. On the second night, while sitting by the campfire, we noticed a small rowboat drifting near the middle of the lake. At first, we thought it belonged to another cabin, but as the flames crackled, one of my friends pointed out there was someone sitting in it, not rowing, sitting, staring toward us. We yelled out, but the figure didn't move. No response. The boat simply drifted, turning slowly until the figure was facing away. Then it vanished into the darkness. It was about 2 years ago when my friends and I rented a lake house for the weekend. We had planned it for weeks, a short getaway, fishing, grilling, and sitting by the fire at night. The house itself sat right on the water, surrounded by trees. At night, the lake looked endless, black, quiet, and still. On the second night, we gathered around the campfire. The fire crackled, sparks floating up into the dark. The woods around us were silent, except for the occasional chirp of a cricket. The lake stretched out just beyond the glow of the fire, calm, reflecting the faint light of the moon. That was when we noticed it. At first, it looked like nothing, just a shape moving slowly across the water, a small boat drifting near the middle of the lake. None of us thought much of it until one of my friends leaned forward, squinting, and said, "Hey, is someone in that? Is there really someone out there at that hour?" Sure enough, there was. A lone figure sat in the boat, not moving, not rowing, just sitting. The boat drifted silently, carried by the faintest breeze across the surface of the lake. The firelight wasn't strong enough to see details, but we could tell it was a person, upright, staring in our direction. For a while, none of us spoke. We just watched, waiting for them to do something, waiting for them to wave, or call out, or roll closer. But the figure didn't move, not even a little. They sat as still as a statue. Why would someone just sit in the middle of a dark lake? Finally, one of my friends cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled out. His voice echoed across the water, bouncing back off the trees. "Hey, you okay out there?" The figure didn't respond. No shout, no wave, nothing. They just stared. The silence was heavy. We tried again, louder this time. "Do you need help?" Still, no response. The only sound was the gentle lapping of the water against the sides of the boat. Then, without warning, the boat shifted. It turned slightly, as if nudged by something unseen. The figure inside slowly rotated with it until they were facing away from us. Did they hear us, or were they ignoring us? We waited, expecting them to look back, to say something, but the boat just drifted, slowly, smoothly. The figure's back remained toward us the entire time. We sat there, the fire crackling, watching as the boat was carried farther and farther away. Eventually, the darkness swallowed it. The boat and the figure disappeared into the shadows of the lake. It was like they had been erased. 1 second, they were there. The next, gone. We stared for a long time, waiting for the shape to reappear, but it never did. Where did they go? For the rest of the night, the mood was ruined. None of us said it, but we were all unsettled. Who would sit alone in a boat at midnight, not responding to voices calling out? We tried to laugh it off, convincing ourselves it was just some fisherman, maybe drunk, be messing with us. But the image of that still figure stayed in my head. When we finally went inside, I found myself drawn to the upstairs window. It overlooked the lake. I stood there in the dark, peeking out through the glass, searching the water. Nothing, just black ripples under the moonlight. But what if the boat had drifted back. What if it was closer now, just out of sight? I eventually forced myself to lie down. The sound of the lake outside the window seemed louder than usual. Every splash of water against the dock made me tense. Every creak of the house settling felt like footsteps on the boards. My eyes stayed open for hours. At some point, I must have drifted off, because when I opened my eyes again, it was morning. The sunlight spilled across the water, and the lake looked normal, calm, empty. Almost like the night before had never happened. But when we went outside, one of my friends noticed something. The rowboat, the same one we had seen the night before. It was tied loosely to the dock, right in front of the house. None of us had tied it there. Later that night, when everyone went to bed, I stayed awake, scrolling on my phone. Around 3 a.m., I heard the sound of wood knocking against the dock. Curious, I looked outside. The rowboat was tied to our dock. No one was in it. The rope was moving, as if freshly tied. I rushed to wake my friends, but when we returned to the window, the boat was gone. Empty water. None of them believed me, saying I must have been tired and imagining things, but I knew what I saw. Later that night, after everyone else had gone to bed, I stayed awake. The house was silent, except for the faint hum of the fridge downstairs. I lay there scrolling on my phone, trying to tire my eyes enough to finally fall asleep. The glow of the screen was the only light in the room. At some point, I heard it, a soft sound outside, dull thud, then another. It was faint, but clear enough to pull my attention away from my phone. It sounded like wood knocking against wood. At first, I thought maybe the wind was shifting the dock, or maybe a branch had fallen into the water. But then it came again, slow, steady, the sound of something bumping against the dock just outside. What could be making that sound at 3 in the morning? I put my phone down and got out of bed. The floorboards creaked under my feet as I walked toward the window. The glass was cool when I pressed my hand against it, peering outside. The lake was dark, the reflection of the moon cutting across the ripples. A tease. That's when I saw it. The rowboat. It's the same one we had watched drifting across the water earlier that night. Only now, it wasn't floating out in the lake. It was tied directly to our dock, sitting there, still, silent, waiting. My chest tightened. I leaned closer to the glass. The rope was knotted, holding the boat steady against the dock, and it was moving, tugging slightly, as if it had just been tied moments before. Who had brought it here? I squinted, looking for any sign of someone standing nearby. Someone walking back up toward the woods, but the dock was empty. The shoreline was empty. The boat itself was empty. It was just there, rocking softly, bumping against the wood. I felt my skin crawl. I backed away from the window, heart pounding. My first thought was to wake my friends. I needed someone else to see it. I didn't want to be the only one. So I rushed across the room and shook one of them awake. "Dude, get up. Look outside," I whispered, panicked. He groaned, confused, but I pulled him up and pointed toward the window. But when we got there, the dock was empty. The rowboat was gone. The water was still again. Only ripples remained where it had been. How could a boat just vanish in seconds? My friend rubbed his eyes, annoyed. He muttered something about me being tired, about me imagining things. He climbed back into bed and told me to go to sleep. But I knew what I had seen. The boat had been tied there. It had been real. I stayed by the window for a long time, staring at the lake. Every shadow on the water looked like something moving. Every ripple looked like a boat drifting closer. My heartbeat wouldn't slow down, skeleton. For just a moment, I thought I saw something. A faint ripple cutting through the surface of the water, moving away from the dock, as if the boat hadn't disappeared at all, as if someone had quietly untied it and rowed back into the darkness. Was someone out there watching us that night? The thought alone made me back away from the glass. I didn't want to stand too close to the window anymore. It felt wrong. It's like if I stared too long, something would stare back. I finally forced myself to crawl into bed. But sleep didn't come. Every little creak of the house made me flinch. The sound of water slapping gently against the shore kept me on edge. And, in the back of my mind, one thought repeated itself over and over. If the boat had been tied there, someone had to tie it. I closed my eyes and tried to tell myself it didn't matter. That maybe the boat had been there earlier and I just didn't notice. Maybe the rope had been tied before we even arrived, but I couldn't shake the image of that rope swaying, fresh, moving, almost like someone had just stepped away from it. Could it have been the same person we saw sitting in the boat before? I lay there, frozen, listening. Minutes turned to hours. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with me, and I drifted into an uneasy sleep. My dreams were filled with water, with the sound of ropes tightening, with the image of a figure sitting silently in a boat, staring at me from the middle of the lake. When morning came, I told the others again what I had seen. But no one believed me. They laughed it off, said I was tired, said I imagined the whole thing. I even joked about it while eating breakfast. But I wasn't laughing, because I knew the boat had been tied there. I knew it had been real. And the fact that none of them believed me only made it worse. What if it wasn't just a boat? What if it was someone who wanted us to see it? The memory stayed with me all day. Every time I looked at the water, I thought about that boat, where it had gone, who had tied it. And more importantly, if it would come back again the next night. On the last night, I made the mistake of sitting by the water alone. It was quiet, too quiet, when I noticed ripples in the lake. The boat was back, drifting slowly toward the dock. This time, the figure inside was standing. As the boat came closer, I realized it wasn't standing. It was leaning, impossibly bent backward, its head dangling at an unnatural angle, its face turned toward me, mouth wide open. I ran inside, locking the door. But for the rest of that night, I heard the faint knock, knock of the boat against the dock until the sun came up. On the last night at the lake house, I made a mistake. I sat outside by the water alone. The air was cool, the kind of chill that seeps into your skin after sunset. The lake was calm, almost too calm. It's a kind of silence where even your own breathing feels too loud. I sat on the dock with my feet hanging over the edge, staring at the water. The moonlight stretched across the surface like silver glass. Everything looked peaceful, but deep down, I couldn't shake the unease that had been building since the first night. Why did I feel like something was waiting for me out there? The longer I sat, the more the silence felt heavy, the kind of heavy that presses on your ears. I thought about going back inside, but I stayed. Maybe a part of me wanted to prove I wasn't afraid. Or maybe I just didn't want to admit how much the strange boat had gotten into my head. That's when I noticed it. A ripple across the surface of the lake, subtle at first. Then another. Something was moving in the water, but there was no breeze. No fish breaking the surface, just the sound of water shifting, as if something was drifting closer. Could it really be back? I leaned forward, squinting into the dark. And that's when I saw it. The boat. The same old rowboat. The one that had vanished the night before. Only now, it wasn't far away. It was slowly gliding toward the dock. At first, it looked empty, shadow against the water. But as it came closer, I saw it wasn't. There was someone inside. A figure, still, silent. My breath caught in my throat. The figure wasn't rowing. The boat was just moving on its own, sliding toward me without a sound. Was I really seeing this? Or was my fear playing tricks on me? I froze, unable to move, my eyes locked on the figure. It wasn't sitting like before. It was standing. Or at least, it looked like it was standing. The silhouette was tall, unnatural in the way it swayed with the boat's motion. I wanted to run back inside, but I couldn't. My legs wouldn't move. It was like my body refused to listen. The boat drew closer. That's when I realized something was wrong. Very wrong. The figure wasn't standing. It was leaning, bent backward at an impossible angle, its chest pushed out, its head hanging toward the water. Its face was tilted upside down, its mouth stretched wide open. What kind of person bends like that? The moonlight hit its face for just a second, and I saw its eyes, wide, unblinking, staring directly at me. The mouth didn't move, but I swear I could hear it breathing. A deep, hollow sound that echoed across the water. I stumbled to my feet, nearly tripping over the edge of the dock. My chest felt tight, my heart slamming so hard it hurt. I backed away, but the boat didn't stop. It kept drifting forward, scooting. The head seemed to tilt even further, as if the neck could snap at any second. Its eyes never left mine, as if waiting for me to come closer. I turned and bolted for the house. My footsteps pounded against the wooden boards of the dock, echoing through the night. My hands shook as I reached for the door, yanking it open and slamming it behind me. I locked it, pressed my back against a wall, and held my breath. For a moment, there was only silence, my own heartbeat in my ears. Then I heard it. Knock, knock. The sound of the boat bumping softly against the dock. Over and over. Couldn't bring myself to look outside. I didn't want to see if it was still there, but I knew it was. I could hear it. It's that steady, hollow rhythm. Knock, knock, knock. What would happen if it tied the boat again? I sat there in the dark, every light in the house off, listening. My friends were asleep upstairs. They didn't hear it. It's only me. For the rest of the night, I stayed by the door, too terrified to move. Every so often, the knocking would stop. The silence would stretch out. So long, I thought maybe it was over. But just as I started to relax, the sound would start again. Faint, relentless. I don't think I slept at all that night. I just waited for the sun. When the first light finally hit the lake, the sound was gone. I opened the door slowly, expecting to see the boat tied there. But the dock was empty. The water was calm. No boat, no figure, just the reflection of the rising sun. Had it all been real? Or was I losing my mind after days of paranoia? Even now, I don't know. Okay, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear it in my head. That steady rhythm. Knock, knock, knock. And I wonder, the boat is waiting for me somewhere else. Story 3 thing in the basement. My cousin invited me to stay at her lake house in Vermont. The house was beautiful, but I noticed one thing. The basement door was locked with a heavy padlock. When I asked about it, she brushed it off. That night, as I tried to sleep, I heard faint scratching coming from the floor beneath my bed. Slow, constant, like something dragging its nails across wood. I thought maybe it was animals, until I realized the basement was directly below me. My cousin had invited me to stay at her lake house in Vermont. It was early summer, the kind of weather where the air is warm during the day, but drops into an eerie coolness once the sun goes down. The drive out there was quiet, endless forests stretching along both sides of the road. When I arrived, the house looked beautiful. A large wooden structure sitting right on the edge of the lake, its reflection shimmering on the water. At first glance, it seemed perfect, peaceful. But I noticed one thing almost immediately: the basement door. It was on the side of the house, made of thick, weathered wood, secured shut with a heavy, rusted padlock. The kind of lock you don't usually see on a vacation home. Stood out in a way that made me uneasy. Why would a basement need to be locked so tightly? When I asked my cousin about it, she brushed it off with a laugh. She told me it was just old storage, nothing important. But the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes bothered me. She changed the subject quickly, as if she didn't want me thinking about it too much. That night, after everyone went to bed, I lay in the guest room trying to fall asleep. The house was quiet, with only the faint creaks of wood as it settled. I stared at the ceiling, half awake, when I heard it. A faint sound, scratching. At first, it was so soft I thought I imagined it. But then it came again, slow, constant, a dragging, scraping sound, like nails or claws pulling across wood. My heart picked up as I sat there listening. Could it just be animals under the house? That's what I told myself. Maybe raccoons, maybe mice. But then I realized where my room was. The basement was directly beneath me, and the sound was rising up from the floorboards right under my bed. The scratching grew more deliberate, long drags, a pause. Then again, as if something was searching. My chest tightened as I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Then I noticed something else. The sound wasn't moving around randomly like an animal would. It was focused in one spot, right below me. It was something directly under my bed, separated only by the floor. I pulled my legs up, sitting there, frozen. The scratching continued for what felt like forever. Every few seconds it would stop, then start again, steady and patient. I couldn't bring myself to move. I couldn't even breathe too loud. I just sat there in the dark, heart racing, listening. Finally, I worked up the nerve to get out of bed. I tiptoed to the window and slid it open, letting in the cool night air. The lake reflected the moonlight, calm and silent, a stark contrast to the sounds coming from under me. I leaned closer, straining my ears. The scratching stopped. Was it listening for me? I slowly backed away from the window, every muscle tense. I forced myself to lie back down, pulling the blanket up to my chin like a child. I don't know how long I stayed awake, but eventually the sound faded. Sleep came only in short bursts, each dream filled with dark images of hands clawing from beneath the floor. In the morning, I asked my cousin again about the basement. I told her I thought I heard animals inside. For a split second, her face changed. Her expression tightened, but she covered it quickly. She insisted it was nothing, probably just the old house creaking. She wouldn't meet my eyes as she said it. Okay, why wouldn't she just unlock the door and show me? The whole day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I walked past the side of the house, my eyes went to that padlock. It looked too solid, too heavy-duty for just storage, and the wood around the doorframe looked scratched. Not deeply, but enough that you could see faint lines carved into it. That night, I didn't want to sleep in that room again, but I had no choice. As soon as the lights went out and the silence filled the house, my fear returned. I lay there, stiff as a board, waiting. Hours passed. And then it came. Scratch, scratch. The same deliberate sound, rising up through the floor. But this time, it was louder, more aggressive. The dragging had rhythmed, almost like it was aware I was there. My breathing grew shallow. I pressed my hand against the mattress, feeling the vibration of the sound beneath me. It was right under my bed again. Was it trying to break through? I couldn't take it anymore. I got up, grabbed my phone, and tiptoed into the hallway. I didn't want to wake my cousin, but I also didn't want to be alone. I sat at the top of the stairs, gripping my phone tightly, listening. The sound continued for several minutes, then suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It felt like whatever was down there had paused. Waiting, I sat there, frozen, staring into the dark hallway that led toward the basement door. I half expected to hear footsteps on the stairs, but nothing came. Eventually, exhaustion forced me back into the room. I didn't fall asleep until the sun started to rise. When I woke later that morning, I noticed something I hadn't before. On the wooden floor near my bed, tiny splinters, fresh ones, was something really clawing its way upward. I left the next day. I didn't give my cousin an excuse. I just said I had to go. She didn't argue. She didn't even look surprised. That alone told me everything I needed to know. To this day, I still wonder about that basement, about what was behind the padlocked door, and most of all, about what would have happened if I had stayed another night. The next evening, my cousin left to run errands, leaving me alone in the house. As darkness fell, the scratching came back, louder than before. This time, it was paired with heavy breathing, as if someone was pressed against the underside of the floor. I grabbed a flashlight and went to the basement door. The padlock was gone. Just gone. The door creaked open a few inches, and I swear I heard whispers coming from the darkness below. I slammed it shut and waited for my cousin to come home. When I told her, her face went pale. She admitted the lock had been on the door since her family bought the place. If it opened, she whispered, it wasn't because of me. The next evening, my cousin told me she needed to run a few errands in town. She said she wouldn't be gone long. That left me alone in the lake house. I remember standing in the living room as she pulled out of the driveway, the hum of her car fading into the distance. Then silence. It's a heavy kind of silence that seemed to settle over the house like a blanket. The sun dipped lower behind the trees, and shadows stretched long across the wooden floors. Outside, the lake grew darker, reflecting only a faint shimmer of fading light. I tried to distract myself with my phone, with TV, anything, but I couldn't stop thinking about the sounds from the basement the night before. The scratching, the dragging, the way it seemed to know exactly where I was. What if I heard it again tonight? As night fully set in, the house became unnervingly still. The wind picked up outside, brushing tree branches against the siding, but inside, nothing. For a while, I thought maybe it had been all in my head. But then I heard it. Scratch, the same dreadful sound, only this time it was louder, more frantic. And it wasn't alone. Along with the scratching came a sound that froze my blood. Heavy breathing, slow, deliberate inhales and exhales, not the shallow kind an animal might make. This was deep, human. It was right beneath the floorboards, pressed up against the underside like someone was lying there, listening. Was someone actually under the house? I sat frozen in the chair, gripping the armrests until my knuckles went white. Every breath from beneath me echoed in the silence. It sounded strained, almost angry. My chest tightened. My instincts screamed at me to leave the house, but I couldn't bring myself to move. My curiosity, or maybe my fear, kept me there. Finally, I grabbed a flashlight from the drawer by the kitchen. I forced myself to walk toward the side of the house where the basement door was. Every step echoed louder than it should have, like the floor itself was warning me not to go any further. My hand shook as I held the flashlight, the narrow beam cutting through the shadows. When I reached the door, my heart nearly stopped. The heavy padlock that had been there the entire time was gone, not broken, not lying on the ground, just gone. The door itself was slightly open, hanging just a few inches ajar, as if someone had unlocked it and slipped inside. How could the lock just disappear? The air near the doorway was colder than the rest of the house. I leaned closer, shining the flashlight into the thin opening. The beam caught only darkness, a hollow black that seemed to swallow the light whole. That's when I heard it. A whisper. At first, I thought it was the wind, but no, it was clearer than that. A low, hushed voice coming from the bottom of the basement steps. Words I couldn't make out. Whispers, overlapping, like more than one person was down there, talking to each other, or maybe it's talking to me. What was I supposed to do? Step inside? My body locked up. My chest pounded so hard I could feel it in my ears. Every instinct told me to run, to get out, but instead I slammed the basement door shut as hard as I could. The sound echoed through the empty house like a gunshot. I held the door closed with both hands, as if something might push it back open. For a few seconds, all I heard was silence. Then, faintly, the whispers stopped. The breathing faded. But I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was down there knew I had heard it. Minutes later, my cousin finally came home. The sound of her car pulling into the driveway nearly made me collapse with relief. I didn't waste a second. I told her what happened, my words tumbling out, frantic and rushed. I explained how the padlock was missing, how the door had been cracked open, how I had heard voices. Her reaction told me everything I needed to know. Her face drained of color. She didn't laugh. She didn't brush it off like before. Instead, she just stood there, staring at the basement door, her expression frozen. Then, in a voice that barely sounded like her own, she whispered something that sent chills down my spine. She said the lock had been on that door since her family bought the place. No one had touched it in years. Her voice trembled as she looked at me and said, if it opened, it wasn't because of me. So who or what opened it? On my last night there, I woke up to the sound of the basement door creaking open. The scratching wasn't beneath me anymore. It was on the stairs, slow, dragging, getting closer. I hid in my room, staring at the crack beneath my door. And then I saw them, thin, gray fingers sliding through the gap, tapping against the wood like they were feeling for me. I didn't wait. I ran out the back door and straight into the woods, and never went back to that lake house. And to this day, I still wonder what would VE happen if I let those fingers push the door all the way open. On my last night there, I couldn't sleep. House felt heavier than usual, like the air itself was pressing down on me. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. Every creak of the old wood made me tense. I kept telling myself it was just the house settling, just the wind, nothing more. But then I heard it, the basement door. That sound will never leave my head. A long, slow creak, like rusted hinges being forced open after years of staying shut. It echoed through the house, sharp and deliberate. My body froze in place. I knew exactly what it was. Was someone actually opening that door? The scratching wasn't beneath me anymore. Could hear it on the stairs now. Slow, dragging, heavy, like something was pulling itself upward, one step at a time. Each sound rattled through the quiet house, closer with every second. My chest tightened. My breaths grew shallow. I sat up in bed, listening, counting the steps. 1, 2, 3. The floorboards groaned with each movement and then paused, as if whatever was on the stairs was waiting, listening. Why did it stop right outside my room? I couldn't bring myself to move. I stared at the door, at the thin crack of darkness beneath it. That's when I saw it. Thin, gray fingers slid into view. Long and bony, stretching through the gap in the wood. They tapped gently, feeling along the frame, searching. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. My throat locked shut. All I could do was watch as those fingers scratched slowly against the door, dragging across the wood. Tap, tap, drag. Was it trying to find a way inside? The handle never turned. The door never opened. Just those awful fingers creeping and curling beneath the crack as though testing the space. My body felt paralyzed, but my mind screamed at me to move, to do anything but sit there and wait. Finally, instinct took over. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut across the room and spilled toward the door. The fingers snapped back instantly, retreating into the dark like they'd never been there. Did it run, or was it still waiting? I didn't waste another second. I threw the blanket off me and bolted for the back door. My footsteps slammed against the wood floor, every sound echoing through the house. I didn't even look back. Didn't want to see what might have been following. The back door stuck for a moment, like it didn't want to open. My hands fumbled with the lock, shaking so badly it slipped twice before I finally yanked it free. Cold night air rushed in, and I stumbled out into the darkness. Behind me, I swore I heard the faintest scrape, the sound of nails against wood. Was it coming after me? I didn't stop to find out. Sprinted straight into the woods, the flashlight beam bouncing wildly as branches whipped across my face and arms. My lungs burned. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might collapse, but I didn't dare slow down. The deeper I ran, the darker it got. The trees closed in around me, swallowing what little moonlight there was. I could hear nothing but my footsteps and my panicked breathing. Nothing chased me, at least nothing I could hear. Was it following in silence? I kept running until my legs gave out. I collapsed onto the damp forest floor, gasping, gripping the dirt like it would hold me steady. My flashlight flickered, then died, leaving me alone in absolute blackness. That was almost worse than seeing those fingers. I waited, straining my ears for any sound. A branch snapping, leaves crunching, breathing, but all I heard was silence. The kind of silence that feels alive. It feels like it's listening. How long could I stay out here? Eventually, I forced myself to my feet and stumbled further until I saw the faint glow of a neighbor's porch light through the trees. I don't even remember knocking on their door. I just remember their shocked face when they saw me, pale and trembling. I didn't tell them everything, couldn't. I just asked if I could stay the night. They didn't ask many questions. Maybe they saw the look in my eyes. Maybe they knew I never went back to that lake house. didn't grab my things. I didn't wait for an explanation. I left it all behind. Okay, but even now, years later, I still see those fingers in my nightmares. And sometimes I wonder, what would have happened if I let them push the door all the way open? And that's it for today's video. 3 disturbing, true lake house horror stories. Which story scared you the most? Comment below and subscribe for more true horror stories.